Hi guys, and welcome to the How to Avoid Project Failure Masterclass. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for signing up to this masterclass. I hope it's going to help you in your property investing journey. That's the reason you're here. So, if you've never seen one of my presentations before, I like to start every single one with a fact. And the fact I want to tell you today is that over 60% of all projects fail. It's actually somewhere between 60 and 70% based on industry studies of project failure. And it's really interesting to note that the projects that are studied are projects that happen in the commercial world. So large scale projects run by client organizations who actually employ professionals to deliver their projects for them. There aren't any failure statistics available for property projects, so who knows what the failure rate of property projects is, but I would hazard a guess it's at least as bad as the projects that are delivered out in wider industry, like I said, that use professional project managers, professional project delivery organisations. So that's a key fact to begin with. So the real question is, the facts are all good and well, but who wants to actually know why? And I know you can put your hands up and I'm not going to be able to see you, but this is why we're here. Do you want to actually know why projects fail? Because if you know why, you can avoid projects failing. Okay, so when they analysed these 60 to 70% of projects that failed, they came up with a number of reasons, and here are the top 9 reasons I've displayed. You can read them: changing priorities, inaccurate requirements, changes in project objectives, unidentified risks, poor communication, undefined project goals, inaccurate cost estimates, inaccurate time schedules, and an inexperienced project manager. Now, the key mathematicians among you might realise that all those percentages add up to more than 100%. So what does that really tell us? What it's telling us is in the projects that failed, more than one of these failure modes happened. So on the projects that failed, more than one reason for failure was present. It was multiple reasons for failure. But the most important thing is there is actually some correlation between all of these 9 failure modes. And when you analyse them a little bit further, what you notice that 6 of the top 9 reasons are all related to scope definition. So defining the scope, defining the what of your project is really important, because if you do that, you can prevent inaccurate requirements, you can prevent a change in project objective, you can identify more risks, you can define your project goals, and you can get a more accurate cost estimate and a more accurate time schedule. These things all link to scope definition. So you can see that defining the scope is really important in preventing project failure. Okay, so for those of you who are relatively new to project management, you might never have seen this triangle before, but it's a really important triangle to remember when you're delivering projects, because it's the project management triangle. So in the project management triangle, you've got 3 sides, as it's a triangle, that cover cost, time, and scope, and they all surround the quality. So that's just a fundamental of project management. But what you might not know is that you can unravel them, as you can see on the right, and put them in an order. So scope comes first, the what of a project, then the schedule or the time, so how long is it going to take, and then once you know what you're doing and how long it's going to take, then you can build up your cost for the project, so how much it's all going to cost. And that's really important, because if you just remember, we've said that inadequate scope definition causes project failure, but inadequate scope definition also causes inaccurate time estimates, so inaccurate schedules, and inaccurate cost estimates. So this is really fundamental. It's the foundation to project success. Okay, so before we continue anymore, I've started with a fact. You're probably wondering who on earth I am. And for those of you that don't know, this is me. I started my career as a quantity surveyor for the largest privately owned construction company in the UK. That's Lang O'Rourke. I worked for them for 4 or so years on some major construction projects. So those projects ranged from, I think the smallest project was 12 million that I worked on, and the largest project I worked on for Lang O'Rourke was somewhere around 75 million pounds. I also had some involvement in some larger scale projects, but I'm not going to claim I worked on them because I was only briefly on them. Okay, so as well as working for a construction company, the largest privately owned one in the UK, I've also worked for a world-leading design, engineering and project management consultancy. So I've seen both sides, worked for a construction company, but I've also worked for the client and for a consultancy. I've ran a project management, quantity surveying and project controls business for nearly a decade. So project controls, as it sounds, is all about controlling projects. It's an arm of project management. I've worked on international projects ranging from 10k refurbs, buy-to-lets, all the way up to £4 billion decommissioning programmes. And I've seen pretty much everything in between. I've worked on a wide variety of projects. I've also taught project management internationally, which sounds a little bit strange, but I've the last role I had in industry as part of my consultancy business, I created 10 project management procedures for an international company that delivers about 150 million euros worth of projects every year. And then we went round the different countries where this company operates and we taught the project managers and all the other project staff in the organisation how to deliver projects the way this business wanted to, which is in alignment with global project management best practice. So as I talk to you now, I'm still consulting on over £1 billion worth of projects located across 4 countries and 2 continents. So I've got quite wide ranging experience. And don't get me wrong, I'm not telling you this to show off or to brag. I'm just trying to tell you that I've seen a lot of stuff in projects and I understand how good projects are delivered well. Okay, so you might have just listened to me talk about all that and think, what on earth am I doing here, giving this masterclass on how to avoid project failure to people in property, especially some people who might be relatively new to property? Well, let me tell you. So I've held down consultancy roles in global businesses, and as you can imagine, I've been recompensed pretty well for the work that I've done. But 2-3 years ago, in 2018, 2019, I started getting exposed more to investing and how to build your own personal wealth. Because even though I had a good role and I was recompensed very well, I also had a lifestyle that went along with it. And I got to the point of thinking where I needed to create a secondary and tertiary stream of income to support me and my family. So the logical route for me, being that I've worked in construction, I've helped builders for the past 10-15 years, was to start investing in property. So what I did was I went and got educated. I went and spent a lot of money, 5 figures, over £10,000 that is, in property education, to get myself educated, to understand everything I needed to know about it. And eventually the plan was then for me to go and invest in property, which I have done now. But what I noticed when I was sat in the property investing forums is that people who were there delivering projects or trying to deliver projects really had no clue on how to deliver a project successfully. And the property education that I received didn't tell the people sat in the room how to deliver projects successfully. It filled the minds with fictitious stories of being able to do refurbishments on buy-to-let properties back to brick for like £9,000, which is just frankly ridiculous, just to make the properties that we're talking about look like brilliant deals where you can get all your money out. But I could see quite clearly that they weren't a true reflection of the real costs. Or maybe they were, but I doubt it. I very much doubt it, especially if you want to do things properly and legally. And then as I got exposed to more property education, I've seen people who were running property education companies telling me about large-scale developments they were working on. So we're getting into the millions of pounds worth of developments, and they faced all the same issues people who don't know how to deliver projects face, like builders going bust, or being stung for a lot of extras, or not developing a project properly before going out to tender. And because of that, I felt almost like a true calling where I wanted to help people in property deliver their projects, which is where my business was born. I started the business and my mindset was on help property people deliver projects. And that's what I currently do. So I've gone full circle now. I'm actually helping people as I set out to originally, and that forms my core business. Okay, so that brief introduction to me over and done with. Let's get into what you're here for, the actual learning, how to avoid project failure. That's it now. There's no more waffle. There's no extended sales pitch or anything in this masterclass. It literally is me going into content to help you deliver projects. So sit comfortably for the rest. Okay, I want to let you into, I'm not going to say secret because it's not, but project management is not rocket science. Despite what people might tell you, despite what you might think, project management, it's not rocket science. And it's evidenced by the fact that I always say this to people, there's no rocket scientists doing project management. All the project managers you ever meet aren't rocket scientists. There might be some exceptions to that at places like NASA, but in the main, project management's not difficult and it's not hard. It's not anything special or complicated. But let me take you from that, what I've just said there, to the reality of where you could be just ahead in the future. So imagine when you're delivering your projects, you had the tried and tested system that's going to work on any project. And I mean any project. Imagine you could estimate the cost and time of any project accurately and quickly without any undue stress, any panicking about, a 20k refurb. You've got a system that you can just nail the cost there and then. You can deliver using one builder or trade subcontractors, trade contractors, depending on what fits the project best. You're never going to have to worry about being ripped off by a builder again, because that doesn't happen in the real world. It only happens when things go wrong on projects. And usually when things go wrong on the projects, the reason it went wrong is staring at you when you look in the mirror. You're never going to pick the wrong builder again, because we've got systems and processes to show you how to find the right builder. And you're going to be able to deliver your projects to time and budget. But I'm not sitting here telling you that there's a simple way that you can just solve project delivery. Stuff still goes wrong on projects, but you'll be in a position where you can manage and control that. So just imagine that was the reality. And what I'm going to show you is the secret sauce, the shortcut to being able to deliver projects. Well, not, because that's bullshit. There is no shortcut. There is no secret sauce. It's all hard work and dedication. And listen, if you sat here hoping that I'm going to give you a shortcut or a secret sauce that you're just going to be able to plug into your business and deliver projects, switch off now. Turn this off and don't bother watching the rest, because this is not for you. What I am going to show you though, if you are still with me, is the system. And this is the system we use to deliver projects. It's split into 3 distinct sections, which you can see. And we start at the top in define. Remember what I said at the beginning, the most important part of any project, the reason why all projects fail, or the majority of them anyway, is because scope definition's poor. So we've dedicated a whole section of our system to defining the scope of your project so it doesn't fail. Then what we do is we move into the set phase of the system, where we set all the strategies, we set the budget, we set the cost, we set the time, we set the delivery strategy, we get all the tendering done, we set the project up for success, and then we start on site. And then what we do is we move into what we call the reset phase. And that's because it's about data analysis, and sometimes you have to reset that data. But that's all about managing and controlling your projects. So this system we use to deliver everything from 10k refurbs all the way up to multi-million-pound projects. And we've even used and taken the lessons we've learned on large-scale engineering projects that are in the billions and simplified them and put them into this model for anybody to use on any property project. It's that simple to do. Okay, so what I'm going to do today in this masterclass is take you through two sections. I'm going to lift the lid on them and show you the inner workings of the blueprint, the successful project delivery blueprint, to show you how you can implement this system to your projects so that you can ensure project success and avoid project failure. So the two sections we're going to take you through. The first one is the most fundamental because it's the very first step. Because most people say to me, where on earth do you start on a project? And that's what I'm going to show you today. I'm going to show you exactly where you start. And that's part of the define stage. The next thing I'm going to do is, because this is something else I see people struggling with a lot, is show you a bit of estimating. Because everybody struggles with estimating the cost of a project. That's the amount of posts to see on social media of people spending weeks trying to work out a cost for a project that's like 100k. It's ridiculous. Last week I put together a 3.5 million euro estimate in 4 hours, and that's to get funding from a business. So it's not difficult, it's not complex. All you need is a system that you can follow, and I'm going to lift the lid on the system that we use to estimate project costs. And I guarantee nobody else will teach you this. Guarantee it. Okay, but before we start, I'm getting you can probably hear from my voice, I'm getting a little bit excited because I love teaching this stuff to people, so I can see the impact it has on the business. But before we do start, just take one thing from today. If you just take one thing at all, you ignore everything else that I'm going to talk about because it's overwhelming. It should be this. Just take this one thing and it'll help you on your property journey. Guaranteed. Do all the hard work on paper and it makes the on-site work easy. So I'm going to repeat that again. Do all the hard work on paper and make the on-site work easy. Everyone thinks the complicated bit of construction and doing projects is on site, but it's not. The hard work all needs to go in before you get on site on paper so that people can just follow that plan and it makes the on-site work easy. And I'm not just telling you this because I'm making it up, because I think so, because it's worked for me on other projects. What I'm teaching you is based on industry best practices, and it's based on an industry best practice that's called front-end loading. Google it if you want, FEL, F-E-L, and you'll be able to see the different stages. So there's 3 distinct parts to front-end load in every project, and you can see them there in front of you. But it runs through the design development, so developing the project design, the project management, so developing the project management documents, and also developing your supply chain, so the people who are going to deliver the project for you. And that can be the contractors, the suppliers, the material suppliers, the plant hire company. It goes all the way back because you're going to need a lot of people to help you deliver your project. I mean, even if you're a builder and you're doing all the manual work yourself, which I'm going to guess you're not, and you shouldn't be if you're doing this, you're going to engage with material suppliers, plant suppliers, subcontractors, so you're going to have to build your own supply chain. And this is a key part of front-end load in a project. So why do we front-end load? As I said, I am not making this stuff up because it's something that's worked for me. This is industry best practice. And I'm just going to link back to a consultant that I've had the fortune of being exposed to as being part of some major projects. So there's a company called IPA, Independent Project Analysis. They have analysed over 21,000 projects globally in 100 countries and from 550 companies. So they've got a lot of project data. And what they've come up with after analysing all this data is that, in essence, the more front-end loading you do on a project, the higher your chance of success. And you can see that here. So at the beginning of a project, so this is the beginning, the appraisal stage, and this is the execution stage. So let's say the construction. You go through this phase at the front stage 1, 2, and 3. Obviously in property, there's just one stage because the projects are much smaller. Then you go out on site and do the work, and then you've got operations at the end, which is immaterial in property. But you can see that the cost of change is really low during these first 3 stages. And then once you get into execution, the period of highest risk, this is where the cost of change goes through the roof. So if you start trying to change stuff while you're on site, it's going to cost you a lot of money. So it's much better to work all the details out at the beginning before you get to site. You can also see that the ability to change easily reduces over time. So as you get onto site and you start doing the project, the ability to change easily drops massively. So that's why it's really important to do all this stuff up front. And as I said, I'm not telling you this because I said so, because Tony Campbell says so. It's not. This is international project management best practice that I've simplified to be used on property projects. That's why I'm teaching it. Okay, so if we just go back to the system, I just wanted to show you that front-end loading is so important, and that's the exact reason why we've dedicated 2/3 of our system to front-end loading a project. You don't get to site until here. This is the point where we move on site, these 2 sections. The rest of it is all about setting your project up for success. That's the exact reason we've done it. So let's start with fundamentals. Fundamental number 1. You may have heard this before. It's called the 6 Ps. Proper planning prevents piss poor performance. I think there's actually a 7th P, but I'm not too sure what it is. You can Google that if you like. But that's a really fundamental, and it links back. Plan your projects properly and they're going to perform well. If you don't, you're going to fly by the seat of your pants, and guess what? You get piss poor performance. So as I said, you probably sat there thinking, this all sounds amazing, Tony, but where do we start? So, as I said to you, I'm going to tell you exactly where to start, because getting started is the first step on your journey. Getting started is usually the hardest part. And once you're started and you start building some momentum, then you can get to where you want to go. Raise your hand if you've read this book. Don't really, because I can't see you, but, well, you can if you like. This is a really important book to read. As you can see, it's had 15 million copies sold, probably more than that now, because there's probably an old picture. But this book is really important. And how we start projects is in the book. It's a second habit. So if I've read this book before, you're probably shouting out the answer. I can't hear you, but you're probably shouting it out and you're right. Although, in the book, it is called something slightly different. In the book, it's called Start with the beginning in mind, I think it is. We call it Start with the end in mind. So start with the end in mind on a project. That's the most important thing to do. We call it sweeteing. Doesn't really make much sense, but you'll notice that's the first thing in our blueprint. Okay, so let's just take that back a step and think about what a project actually is. So if you Google what is a project, it'll tell you a project is defined as a temporary endeavour with a defined start point and a defined end point, which you can see from this nice graphic that I've put on there. So it's got a defined start and it's got a defined end, and it's a temporary endeavour. What does that remind you of? I can tell you, you do probably at least one of these a day. A journey. So a project is just like a journey. So when you go from point A to point B, where you are now to your destination. So if a project's like a journey and you need to start with the end in mind, the first thing you need to do is define what's called the project objective. But if you look at it like a journey, the first thing you do when you're figuring out your journey is you enter your destination. Where are you going? That's what you need to do on a project, is figure out where on earth you're going. And that's called the project objective. And it sets out what you're actually trying to achieve in your project. And exactly the same as if you're on a journey. If you don't know where you're going, how will you ever know you've got there? If you jump in your car and set off on a journey and you don't know where you're going, how are you going to know when you've arrived? You won't, will you? You set off with a clear objective in mind. So you might be going to X place, and then you've got to choose how you're going to get there. You're going to take the fastest route, you're going to avoid certain places, you're going to take the most efficient route, the shortest route, whatever it is. You try and figure this out, don't you, before you go, so you can plan properly. Remember, proper planning prevents piss poor performance. So this is exactly the same for a project. If you don't set an objective at the beginning, how will you ever know when you've achieved it? You won't. You will never know when you've achieved it. The good thing about it is, if you set an objective, it also gives you the ability to create a plan B, a plan C, or whatever you might need. And as we all know in property, sometimes you need to pivot at short notice, which is difficult without pre-planning, especially when you're in the middle of a construction project. Because if you haven't planned it in and you need to change in the middle of being on site, then you're going to be coming up, there's going to be some serious pain coming your way. You need to plan all this in at the beginning. We've done this before on a project we set out originally. It was a buy-to-let. It was a house that we were turning into a buy-to-let by means of refurbishment. And the original plan was to turn it into serviced accommodation. But shortly after we started on the project, we realised that we wouldn't be able to refinance the property in time because there were no no serviced accommodation mortgage providers who would refinance within 6 months of completion because our refurbs are quick. And because of that, we then had to change strategy. So instead of it being a serviced accommodation unit, we turned it into a family home, a family buy-to-let. And there wasn't that much difference between the two, but there was some stuff. But we'd planned this out from the beginning. So literally we just pivoted to the new strategy and nobody knew, apart from the investor and me. That was it. Nobody else knew. The builder had no clue. None of them did. None of the builders, none of the trades, anything. We just pivoted. Okay, so you probably sat there thinking, project objective sounds amazing, but what do we do? Well, it's quite simple. The 5 things you've got to answer. I'm going to talk you through all 5. See, the next project you do, you can set your own project objective before you go, and then you know your destination. So all you've got to do is plot the journey from where you are to where you're going, and you'll get there, and you'll know when you've arrived. So the first thing we do is talk about the plan for the project and how do you get there. So what's the plan? How do you get there? And then it allows you to set a plan B and a plan C, and it gives you the ability to pivot on the project, just like I've told you there. So the plan for that project was to refurbish the property. That's how we were getting there. And the overall plan was for it to be a serviced accommodation unit. However, as I said, the secondary plan was for the refurbishment into a family home that we could let out. Okay, the second thing you ask yourself is, what's the exit? How are we getting out of this project? on that one, I've already told you what the exit was. It was refinance onto a serviced accommodation mortgage. And then when we found out we couldn't do that, we had a secondary exit, which was a buy-to-let mortgage. So we planned our primary exit and also our secondary exit so that we had the contingency plan in place. But that's really good because it allows you to understand the overall project duration, because that's important, because when you're doing projects, you're going to have costs which are time related. As it says below, it allows you to get a more robust estimate because 50% of any project costs are going to be time related on your project. The other 50% will be fixed, like materials, although they're not quite fixed at this minute in time. And plant hires time related too, but labour, project management, utility bills, they're all time related. The third thing you need to ask yourself is, who's your target market? And this is closely linked to number 4, but we'll start with this one. So who's the client avatar? What do they want? And then you can design the project around them. And this will result in longer term, better quality tenants. So for the SA market we were focusing on, the target market was contractors. For the target market for the buy-to-let, the target market was a single parent potentially, or a family with one child because there's only 2 bedrooms. So we know, then you've got to figure out what these people want. You need to understand this because then it allows you to design the project around them. Because if your target market is young couples or your target market is a young family, they might want different things, and they probably do want different things from a house. So it allows you to design it around them. Then you need to think about what's the demographic. So this is the same thing. Client avatar, what do they want? But you've got to think about the amount of finance they've got access to, because doing a property for a footballer is going to be a different specification. Just doing a social housing HMO, isn't it? Not that the people in the social housing HMO, or not that you buy to let tenants, don't deserve an 80 grand kitchen, but you're not going to be putting an 80 grand kitchen in a 50 grand house. It just doesn't make sense. So you need to understand this because it allows you to design your project around them. And then the final thing you need to think about is the project constraint. What's the key constraint of your project? And I'm going to take you now back to the project management triangle, which is the reason I showed you it in the first place. So one of these 4 things is going to be the key constraint on your project. It's going to be cost or money. It's going to be time. It's going to be quality, or it's going to be scope. And you need to understand what it is because you need to make decisions about it. So let's say you're doing a project and you've got a refurb budget of 20k, and you go out and you tender the project and the costs come back at 24. Then your key driver is going to be cost. That's going to be your key constraint if you can't get access to any more funds. So then you need to make every decision on your project about cost until you bring the cost back down into a number you can live with. And this is really important. So on that project I'm talking about, that I've used as an example, cost was the key driver on that. So we had to minimise the project costs. And what that means sometimes is you might have to wait a little bit longer to get the job done because you can't have quick and cheap. Usually doesn't work together. So we then had to, you might have to wait for a cheaper tradesman to be available to be able to do the job. So on and so forth. Then when you're moving into like higher quality projects, quality might be the key constraint. Or if you're targeting a specific person, then the scope of the project might be really important in that instance to be able to service the needs of the avatar you're targeting. But this is a really important concept and something probably not many other people talk about. But you need to understand this as part of your project in order to be able to deliver your project successfully. Okay, done. Step number 1, how simple was that? So remember, start with the outcome. Start with the end in mind. Set your project objective. Just 5 simple questions you need to ask yourself. You need to write them down and form it into a statement. And once you've done that, you'll have a project objective defined, and from that then you can start to define your project scope. But you need that starting point, because as with a journey, if you don't know where you're going, how will you ever know you've got there? Okay, fundamentals. Number 2, set a realistic budget. Now, I just want to add a disclaimer here. I don't watch RuPaul's Drag Race. My wife does. But this always sticks in my head. He always comes on and says to them, don't fuck it up. And this is important about your budget. Don't fuck it up. You've got to set a realistic one. If you don't, you end up in a bad place. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, so I'm not going to spoil it just yet. So, I just want to give you a little warning before we proceed. Larger projects can make you a lot of money, but they can also cost you a lot of money too. And this is really important because everybody's definition of a larger project is going to be different. If you've never done a project before, a 20k refurb might be a large project to you. If you've done a couple of HMO conversions, you might be looking at doing a couple of $100,000 project, but that's a big one for you. I've done projects that are hundreds of millions of pounds, so £30 million projects to me aren't large, they're pretty small. But it's all about perspective. What I'm trying to say is the bigger the project you take on, and the larger they get, the more risk you're going to be taking. So you need to manage and control that risk. Or if they go wrong, they can cost you a lot of money. I'm going to give you a little example of one. Think, yes, now. So I want to talk about a project that I've been involved with. And I want to talk to you about when things go wrong and how badly wrong they can go. So this is a project I've been involved with. It's in Liverpool. I haven't been involved from the beginning. I started later on in the project, but let me give you the overview of the project as it is. I think it actually started before this point, but I've summarised this to give you an idea. So in March 2020, the project started. The client had done his due diligence and he engaged a full professional team. So he'd engaged with a professional quantity surveying and project management practice who are a national organisation. So it's not even like they're a small 2-bit one. They had all the credentials to deliver the project. They sent the tender out and awarded the contract to what looked to be a capable contractor if you just took a quick glance on it. By the way, this project's a commercial conversion in Liverpool, 11 apartments, offices to 11 apartments. A couple of $100,000 was the original project cost. 300, I think it was 300 something. So anyway, they awarded it to a capable contractor in March 2020, and the work started on site. At the beginning of the project duration was 12 weeks. And just to give you an idea, that duration was ridiculous. I could have told them that just looking at it. But they took it as read from the contractor. 4 weeks in to the contract, the contractor was reporting a 4.5 week delay. So people wonder if time travel is possible. Well, it clearly is, because 4 weeks into a project, they were 4.5 weeks behind. So they'd actually gone back in time by 2.5 days, a month into the contract. I mean, at that point, alarm bells should be ringing. So then in August 2020, they're 12 weeks into the contract. And conveniently 12 weeks behind schedule. So they've done 12 weeks worth of work and they're 12 weeks behind. So they're pretty much at the point where they started. The contractor repudiated the contract. I'm not going to go into that. If you want to know what it means, Google it, or you can ask me if we ever get to meet each other. And they submitted their final accounts, despite not being finished, for 60% of the total project cost, being that they're still in the position at the beginning and they're asking for 60% of the total project cost. I mean, don't be wrong, COVID had happened and all stuff like that. So this wasn't the easiest projects, but, as I said, projects go wrong. They also, interestingly enough, the existing QS contract expired at this point towards the end of last year, end of 2020. and it wasn't renewed, surprisingly enough. The contractor issued adjudication proceedings against the client. It's facing a legal battle. Solicitors have been drafted in and been involved. The contractor appoints a claims specialist. And at this point, if this is you, you're probably going to be shitting yourself. And you should be, because when a contractor appoints a claims specialist, you know they mean business. And this is when I got involved in the project with the client. So the client got in touch with me and I offered, well, he told me the story. And because I want to help people in property out, I came in to help out in between Christmas and New Year. Normally I have that time off, but I didn't. I came into work in between Christmas and New Year and reviewed all the documents he'd sent me. And adjudication was to be issued at the first week in January, I think it was. I can't remember the exact date. I think it was the 7th or the 8th of January. The adjudication proceedings were happening. But I came in, reviewed the documents. I'm not telling you this to brag or for you to think I'm amazing. I'm just telling you as a matter of fact. I came in and settled the final account one day before the adjudication, so the day before the proceedings were being issued, and I managed to get a 35% reduction on the project, which was outstanding really, because the contractor could, if they were commercially astute, they could have asked for more money and probably justified it. But luckily enough, they weren't, and I managed to battle them down. And we settled only slightly over the amount of money they'd done. So I saved the client 63k, which I don't know what the return on investment was for how much he paid me at that point in time, but it was astronomical return on investments, 300, that, I don't know, something, a lot of return on investment for what I'd done. And then, guess what? The project was where it was, still with 12 weeks to go. No real work, some work had commenced, obviously, but it's difficult trying to find contractors who'll pick up somebody else's work partway through. So we had to retender the project for the clients. Large parts of the work needed amending, dismantling, remediating, and guess what? The anticipated construction duration is still 12 weeks. It's like the project that never gets away from 12 weeks. And it's now October 2021 and we're still not back on site because of the issues that have been had on the project. With the original architect, there was issues with them. The client appointed a secondary architect and engineer, issues with them. Now we're on our third one to try and get the project resolved and back on site. But we will get it back on site. It's all set up properly for success now because we front-end loaded it and we're just ready to get back on site and complete it. So that's what happens when things go wrong. It goes wrong sometimes badly. And I mean, this hasn't really gone that wrong, but you can see from what's happened. If this was your first attempt at a commercial conversion, would you ever do another one? Probably not. And that's why you should get involved at the beginning with somebody who knows what they're doing and set your project up properly. Because for me, as I said, a 300 grand project to me is a pretty small project. Okay, remember how I said I wanted to help people deliver projects. I'm hoping you've got that now by me working over Christmas and settling this issue. Most people would have said no to this client because it was a mess where he was and it needed resolution. So ever since I started my business, I've been helping people deliver projects, and I just wanted to give you some of the results. And again, I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm not. I'm just telling you as a fact that you can achieve these results on your projects too. So here's 4 projects, the last 4 that I've done. 2-bed buy-to-let, original estimate, 25,857 quid. The end cost of the project was 25,700, so 130 quid saving. Project 2, 2-bed buy-to-let, original cost, 3-bed buy-to-let was 2 to 3-bed conversion. 38.5 was the original cost, end cost of the project, 38,270, whatever. So another 220 quid saving for the client, brilliant. Delivered on budget. Project 3, another 2-bed buy-to-let, original estimate, you can see there, 24,300, end cost, 24, just under 1. So another 200 or 150 quid saving on the original project estimate. Next one, 9 apartments, original estimate, 335 grand, return tenders, 334 grand. It's almost like I know what I'm talking about. Like I said, I'm not telling you this to show off or for you to think I'm amazing. I'm really not. I'm just telling you this is the facts. The ironic thing is, project 1, 2, and 3, I spent less than half an hour in the property and came up with those original estimates. And I guess what? We delivered the projects to the budgets that we set originally. And don't get me wrong, it's not like it was all plain sailing. On all of those projects, at some point, we were forecasting a project overspend. But because we knew cost was the primary driver on the project, guess what? We managed and controlled the cost in the budget using our project delivery blueprint. Who put your hand up? Put your hand up if you want the capability to estimate like this. I mean, if you don't, you want to be turning this off right now. Of course you do. And there's nothing special about this. Like I said, it's just following a system and understanding the basic principles of estimating. And this is where I'm going to show you something that I guarantee you will not hear from anybody else, because I doubt anybody else understands this. People I see on social media all the time bashing ballpark estimating when literally they have no clue what they're talking about. Anyway, I'm going to tell you something that's top secret that only the people who've listened to this masterclass will know. I'm not really. You think you've gathered by now, there are no secrets here. All I'm doing is telling you international project management best practice. So I'm a member of the PMI, Project Management Institute, American-based project management organisation, one of the biggest in the world. Unfortunately, I'm one of 5,000 people on the planet, or actually just less than 5,000 people, to be awarded their risk management professional certification. I'm not showing off, I'm just telling you as a fact. I've studied because I want to learn everything I can about delivering projects so I can be of service to my customers and clients. I'm also a member of AACE, the Association for the Advancement of Cost Engineering International, another American organisation who are focused on cost engineering, so managing and controlling cost and time across projects internationally. I'm not quite certified with them yet, but I will be soon. I'm taking the exam to be a certified estimating professional because, again, I want to give the best service I can to my clients and customers. And all I'm doing here is telling you exactly what they tell you to do. Stuff that's based on global project management best practice that people have done before and people will continue doing because it works. So here we go. No one else will teach you this. This is the estimating funnel. This is the fundamentals of estimating. So the 5 classifications of estimate, I'm going to take you through them. So you've got ballpark estimating, the thing which people slate all the time on social media and property circles. I have no real clue why, because it's the beginning of the estimating funnel. Every project goes through this. And what it's telling you is that when you do a ballpark estimate, it's got quite a lot of uncertainty, minus 50% to plus 100%. So basically the number you come up with here could be half as much or twice as much as what you think it could be. And that's pretty scary. People don't like that because people like certainty. But just bear with me and I'll explain this to you in a bit more detail. Then we go through the estimate classifications. Class 4, Class 3, Class 2, Class 1. And as you can see, you move through the funnel and you get more certainty as you get to a higher classification of estimates. This is the most certain estimate type here. But what's really interesting is the classification of estimate is linked to how much you know about your project. So at the beginning of your project, when you know nothing, 0 to 5%, you're going to only be able to produce a ballpark estimate. You're not going to be able to produce any more than that. Then as you move through the funnel, you can see as you get to a class 4 estimate, you might know up to 15%. A class 3 estimate, you might know up to a quarter of the information about your project. This is the amount of front-end loading you do. Then class 2, you might know up to half, and then by the time you get to class 1, you know 50% or more of what's going on in your project. So you know all the detail, you've got all quotations, you've defined the scope, you've got everything nailed. And what people tell others to do who don't understand this is because they don't like ballpark estimating, they're scared of it. The way that you enhance your estimate is by spending loads of time and effort defining your scope so you can get a certain estimate. And that is partially true, but you shouldn't be scared of this back here because this is how projects are estimated. I have to estimate projects all the time I've never seen, I never will see because they don't exist. There might only be a couple of drawings, and yet it's a £200-300 million building or facility. I've still got to produce an estimate for it, and you start with a ballpark because you don't know very much about the project. So you accept the uncertainty. So I hope you understand that concept because it's fundamental to estimating. This underpins every bit of estimating you do. And if you grasp this concept, you'll get better at estimating. So let me talk you through a little bit more. So let's pick this apart a little bit. There are 5 estimate classes and they relate to how much you know about your project. So a ballpark estimate means you know less than 5%. A class 4 estimate or comparison means you know less than 15%. A class 3 estimate or a preliminary ones means you know less than 25%. A class 2 estimate or an intermediate one means you know less than 50%. And a class 1 estimate, the definitive one, means you know more than 50%, so you've defined everything in your project. But you're not going to do that on your first viewing. So when you're on your first viewing and you're walking around or you're looking at the pictures on Rightmove, you're up here. And remember what I told you before? Those projects I was talking about, the 3 buy-to-lets, I'd spent less than half an hour in the property. So I would say I was around class 4 or class 3. Yeah, I managed to create an estimate, which I managed to deliver the projects for, almost like magic, like I know what I'm talking about. But here's an important thing to understand. When you're doing estimating, the inputs equal the outputs. And it's probably easier to say shit in, shit out. You probably heard that saying before. So you put shit in, you get shit out. You put good stuff in, you get good stuff out. I hope that makes sense to you. And it's exactly the same in estimating. So I'm going to go a little bit deep here. So I hope you're still following me. There are really only 3 types of estimate that you can do. And that's it. There are obviously different types of these, but these are the high level headline estimate types you can do. So first of all, you've got a parametric estimate, which is a little bit of a guess. The second estimate you've got is intermediate, so it has some detail, like walking around the property for a little bit. So parametric estimate, a bit of a guess, means you've looked at some pictures and you're taking a stab at it. An intermediate estimate means you've walked around it, done a couple of measurements and done a bit of calculation. And then a fully detailed estimate means you've got all the information and you've built up a very detailed cost for the works. So they're the only real 3 types you can do. You can't do anything else. And you can see here what that might be. So a parametric estimate might be a guess or using information from a previous project. So the last 2-bed buy-to-let refurb that I did that went back to brick cost me 30 grand, which means this one that I'm doing is going to be around 30 grand. It might be an intermediate estimate, so you might take it off and use rates or a budget cost from a contractor. So on the last project that I did, the kitchen was 3 grand. I'm going to be doing a similar kitchen, so it's going to be 3 grand. And you do that for all of the items in your estimate. Finally, you've got a detailed estimate, which means you're going to do a detailed estimate or quotation from a contractor, which means for the plastering, you might work out how many man days of plastering it's going to take, how many bags of plaster you need, how many bags of bonding, how many plasterboards, how many beads, all the rest of it, and work out the cost that way. But you're not going to be doing that unless you know what you're doing. So don't worry about that one because you don't need it. So let's play a little game remembering what I said about outputs equaling inputs. So the overall estimate class in the estimating funnel is linked to how much you know. And that's also linked to the type of input you can do. So when you do a class 5 ballpark estimate, guess what? You're going to be taking a guess or using information from a previous project. Same for a class 4 estimate where you know less than 15%. So until you know more than 15% about a project, there's no need to try and force detail that doesn't exist. Then for class 4, class 3 and class 2 estimates, you might use takeoffs and rates or a budget cost from a contractor. So you can do all of those using information that I've given you. If you've got my property viewing checklist, you've got that. If you need rates for things, I've also got them too. So all you've got to do is reach out. And then the only way you can achieve a definitive estimate, a class 1 estimate, is by doing detailed prices, so detailed bottom-up estimating, labour, plant and materials, or get a detailed quotation from a contractor. You can't do anything more. So trying to force this amount of detail at the beginning of a project is ridiculous. What you've got to do is just accept what you've got here. That's all you need to do. And take a guess or use information from a previous project, or estimate using takeoffs and rates or budget costs from a contractor. So if you're delivering buy-to-let refurbs, get a copy of my property viewing checklist. That's got all the costs you're ever going to need on for you to be able to create accurate project estimates. So, like I've said a couple of times, I hope you all see the lunacy here in what really goes on out in the real world of property investing. Most people do this, which is the idiocy that I see. So they start at the beginning of the project. They go out and have a look. Think, how much is this going to cost? Don't know. What am I going to do with this? Don't know. What work needs doing in the property? Don't know. So they think, I don't know. Who will know? I'll give a builder a bell. Let's ring a builder, get him round and he'll solve all my problems for me. But he won't. What he'll do is he'll give you a cost for what he can see or what he thinks you want, but not really it. And then what happens is you enter the twilight zone. Not really the twilight zone. What you do is you enter the spiral of despair. And that's when stuff starts going really wrong on a project, because you make bad decisions. And then what happens is you have an impending project disaster. It's just ahead. And this is what happens if you start projects and the answer to any questions that you ask yourself in your head is a dunno. Because defining all that scope up front is what's key to project delivery and key to being able to estimate projects properly, surrounding yourself with people who actually know how to deliver projects. So it's little wonder over 60% of all projects fail, because that's what I see every day. I see people not knowing what they're doing, not having a clue about how to estimate projects, not having a clue about how to define the scope. So no wonder they're all failing, because they're just walking around wondering what on earth they're doing, or trying to get a builder to solve all the problems for them, when in reality a builder's just going to be guessing as well. No matter what any builder says, they're just going to be guessing, because they need to know what spec of everything you want, how expensive you want your kitchens and your bathrooms to be, and what type of finishes you want. Because without knowing that, they can't give you an accurate quotation, and you can't get that information without first defining the scope. So that's why projects fail, and I don't want your projects to fail. So please don't be another failure statistic. Just don't do it. Don't walk into a project saying I don't know. Figure it all out. Define your project scope. Start with the project objective, and then there's a set process to go through to define the scope. I obviously can't. We've been talking here for nearly an hour, so I can't tell you all this stuff just on a masterclass, because it'd take me days and days. In fact, the mastermind programs that I run with my students, some of them are 6 months long for them to be able to learn how to deliver projects properly, to implement the systems into their business. So I can't teach it all in the masterclass, but what I can do is show you the basics, show you the fundamentals, so that you can go and start applying these on your project and not be afraid of not knowing where to start, or not being afraid of not knowing how to start your project cost estimates. But don't be another failure statistic, especially after you just listened to what I've just told you. So if you don't want to be a failure statistic, stick around. This isn't going to be a long sales pitch. Literally, it's just an offer to you, because that's not the way I operate. There's no sales pitch, no pressure. It's basically, I want to offer you something that I know will help you, and you will know whether it's right for you to take it or not. So basically, I'm just going to offer you one invitation. An invitation to learn the system and to implement it in your property journey, so that you can deliver any project you come up against, whether it be a small scale refurbishment, even if you're doing serviced accommodation and all you're doing is tarting the property up, painting it, bit of flooring, potentially kitchen or tiling or bathroom, wherever it is, a small refurb. This system will help you. It's also going to help you if you're doing large scale conversions of HMOs, commercial conversions, whatever it might be. But in those bigger projects, I'd always suggest you employ project professionals. But this system will help you deliver any project, because I use it to deliver all of mine. Basically, the offer I'm going to make to you is, so I normally charge for calls with me. It's not a massive amount of calls, usually are, but what I'm going to do is, for you sitting and listen for an hour of me talking about how to avoid project failure, and because I think you're going to want to avoid project failure after what I've just told you, and you can see the benefit in having a systemized approach to delivering projects, I'm going to offer you a call for free, where we can talk about where you currently are in your property journey and how I can potentially help you accelerate it and deliver projects to time and budget. That's it. All you've got to do is click the link below, and it'll take you to book a call. And as I said, that call is completely free. There's no high pressure sales pitch or whatever on the call. It's literally you telling me about your property journey and me offering you a solution to the problems that you may be facing. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you've enjoyed this this mastermind session. And I really hope I get to speak to each and every one of you who've sat all the way through to the end on our call. So as I said, click the link, book yourself a call at a time convenient for you, and hopefully I'll speak to you then. Cheers.